Okay, so we're on our third session now, and we're with the same volunteer here. We're treating the DRA, and we're at about 3 weeks from our last session. So again, we're seeing her once every 3 weeks. And when she first came in, her measurements for DRA above the umbilicus, right here, was a 3.5. At the umbilicus or the belly button was a 3.5, and below the umbilicus was a 3.5. That's before we did anything. After her second visit with us, this measurement up here went from a 3.5 to a 2.0, so 2 finger widths. At the belly button or the umbilicus, it went from a 3.5 to a 1, which was great and wonderful. And then below the umbilicus went from a 3.5 to a 1 also. And so where we left off on that second visit, we were at 2 finger widths here, we're at 1 finger width here, and 1 finger width here between these muscle bellies. So we'll see. Don't know what's happened over these last 3 weeks. Things could have opened back up a little bit, things could have closed a little bit, things could be stabilizing and kind of staying the same. So we're going to go ahead and measure her now. And so again, my right ring finger is in that belly button, and then my other 2 fingers right where my index finger comes. This is my first measurement spot. Again, you can measure anywhere from the xiphoid process to that umbilicus for that first spot. For me, I find a lot of times, especially with women, the biggest splits tend to be around the belly button or the umbilicus. So I like to measure this way. Also, I know I'm measuring the same spot every time. If I do this, right where that index finger comes, put my fingers across horizontally here, and then go ahead and raise your head up for me, look up a little bit further for me, yep, and then back down. So it's a tight 2, so it's still a 2 for me. I have an idea of what's happening here. We're gonna save that though for visit 4. I think there's another technique that we're gonna have to do to help close that up. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna get to it. So that's still a 2. It's stabilizing as a 2. If we come in here at the umbilicus, go ahead and raise up. Come on up. Good. So that's still a roomy 1 for me. So her muscle belly is right here, okay, and her muscle belly is right there. So if I try to put this finger in, I'm right on the muscle belly. So we're still there to a roomy 1. Go ahead and come back down. So it didn't close anymore, and to be honest with you, at the umbilicus, a 1 is normal. Okay, so I'm not worried about this. I would like it to be maybe a little bit tighter, maybe not a roomy 1, but like a more of a tight 1, but that's just me being picky, but a 1 is normal. If we come down for the inferior 1, again, I put my index finger in the belly button as I drop these 2 fingers down. Right where my ring finger is where our measurement is going to be, and go ahead and lift up. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so if I'm being generous, I'm going to give her a 0.5 here. So there's been some closure down at this lower one. It's super, super shallow, and it's a 0.5 now. So it went from a 1 to a 0.5. So this is stayed at a 2. This is stayed at a roomy 1. And this is like a very shallow 0.5. So again, we've got some closure happening here, which is great and wonderful. Again, just a little bit of a suprapubic scar down here from a C-section. I think that's what kind of opened that up a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and do the techniques again for the jejunal-ilium, see if we can get a little bit more closure. Again, our protocol for this is we'll treat the jejunal-ilium for 4 visits and see what happens. And again, if this one doesn't, and you can tell, this is the one that is the most open right now. Even with her in a resting position, you can tell this is kind of closed up, and this is not so much. And so there's something else that we're going to end up treating here. So again, stay tuned after that 4th visit. If it still doesn't close in 4, there's something else with visceral manipulation that we can do that we're kind of finding out. So if we go to the jejunal-ilium here, we're going to do the root just like we did last time. So go ahead and bend your knees for me. There we go. So we're going to go to the superior aspect of the root. So again, we find DJ here. It's on a line from her left mid-clavicle to the belly button or the umbilicus, and about 2 finger widths up on there. There's DJ. So just superior and a little medial to DJ, we put our fingers down, and we sink the sides of our thumbs into the body until I feel tension. Right there. And then I'm going to slide inferior until it's almost like I hit a roadblock. Okay, I hit a bump. That's the root. Okay, that's the root of her jejunal ileum. And with my thumbs, I'll sink in, I'll load that root perpendicular, and I'll scoop it anterior. So it's this and this. And I'm trying to figure out what is the tightest spot. So I'll move my thumbs over, and I'll test another spot here. Sink in, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. This is feeling much better than what it used to feel like for her. And that's about as far as it's going to go. When we get closer to the ileocecal valve over here on the right-hand side, it gets looser. Most of her restrictions are here, kind of midline. And between these two, I would say this one right here is the most restricted one between these two. So I'm going to keep my thumbs there. And I'm going to bring one finger from each hand down to find the inferior aspect of the root below the belly button here, but again, not lateral to DJ. So if we draw a line straight down from DJ, we don't go lateral to that. So my fingers are here, they sink in until I feel tension. They slide up, right there's her root, and then I load that root perpendicular and scoop anterior. So it's this, and kind of a pluck up. Okay, so here, load, and a pluck. Right, so we come in. We're going to test numerous spots to figure out what's the tightest spot down here. That one's the tightest so far. I move over. That one's not very loose either. As we get closer to ileocecal valve, or to the right side of the body, it gets a lot looser. So I'm between two spots here. This one and this one. I feel like it's this one right here. Okay, it's the tight one. And it feels like it's going down into her scar a little bit. So I'm going to come back up to the restricted spot on the superior aspect of the root, which is right here with my thumbs. So I'm going to sink those thumbs in, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. Go ahead and bend this arm for me over here, your right arm. There you go. And then take it over your head very slowly. Keep going. Keep going. And a little bit more. And right there. Okay, so I had her move her right arm up until I felt tension under my thumbs. My fingers aren't doing anything. They're just kind of a placeholder for where the restriction is on the inferior aspect of the root. The release feels like my thumbs are moving to her left and to her right and to the left and to the right. It's really the root that's kind of sliding back and forth to release. And then right there it stops. So go ahead and bring that arm down, but keep it bent for me, because that works pretty good for us. If we come back in and we recheck this, it's looser than it was a second ago. I also can feel her abdominal aorta, so don't be surprised when you do this technique. Don't be scared of that. This root sits just anterior to her abdominal aorta, so you're going to feel a pulse, especially when the releases start to happen. Go ahead and take that arm up. There's our second one here. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Right there. Very good. And there comes the release. Again, kind of sharing to the left and sharing to the right, kind of up and down the root, and then it's done. And then go ahead and bring your arm down, but keep it bent. Good. I could also have her use breathing or move her neck, anything that would create tension here, but her arm movement is actually working pretty well for us. So I'm going to just stick with that. Go ahead and go up again. Right there. And the last one usually is pretty fast. And that's it. And then come on back. Good. And then we always retest, and it's just looser than it was before we started, which is great. And we come down here to the inferior aspect of the root and that restriction. I'm going to move my fingers around to make sure I'm exactly on the tightest spot, which is right there for her. Okay. I'm going to sink in. I'm going to load perpendicular, I'm going to scoop anterior, and then go ahead and roll your pelvis forward for me. Yeah, perfect. Oh, that's great. There we go, that's all I needed. So it's just kind of shearing to the right, and then to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, kind of fast. My load is just perpendicular and anterior, and right there she stops. Go ahead and relax the pelvis. And then we come back in, we'll do it again, sink in, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. Go ahead and go with that anterior pelvic tilt. Yep, great. Take your knees to the left, just a smidge, right there. Perfect. And there it goes, side to side, right, left, left. And there it stops, and then come on back. Relax everything. Retest. Things are getting looser. We'll go one more time here. And then go ahead, anterior pelvic tilt, or roll your pelvis forward. Legs to the left again, and right there. Good. And it just goes back and forth with the release. And then it's done. Go ahead and come back out. And the last thing we do with that root is we have our fingers on the restricted aspect on the inferior aspect of the root. We have our thumbs on the superior aspect of the root, the restricted spot. We sink the sides of our thumbs and fingers into the body. We load perpendicular to the roots, almost like a gentle squeeze. And then we scoop anterior. It's almost like we're picking the whole thing up. The release feels like my thumbs go one way and my fingers go the other way. It's really the root that's doing that. And it's pretty fast, and it's done really quick. Okay, and so that's the root, and that feels better already. Okay, so from the root, the next thing that we're going to do is the loops, loop. So we're going to work with motility first. So I'm going to have her straighten out her legs for me. Motility is, we described it in our first session, right? It's an embryological migratory pattern that all the organs make. And so the jejunal-ileum, what's going to happen is the loops are kind of going to come up like this and then go down like this. What I'm looking for is there a spot where I just don't feel any movement under my hands? That means there's probably two loops that are kind of stuck together. So that's what I'm looking for right now. So my hands are super, super, super light. Okay. All right, so I feel movement under the top part of my left hand. I feel movement under the bottom part of my right hand, or my ring finger and index finger. So like this kind of section through here, I don't feel as much. So I'm going to focus now and try to feel, where do I not feel movement between these two hands. Feel movement here. Not so much here. Now I'm right-handed, so I'm just going to cheat and use my right hand right now. So I feel movement here. I feel movement here. It's right there. That's where I don't feel movement. Okay, so go ahead and bend your knees for me for a second. So I always have them bend their knees whenever I'm going to sink. So I'm going to put two fingers right on that loop that was restricted. I'm going to sink my fingers down towards the table, and then I'm going to drift off. And when I do that, the loop is going to go over to the loop that it's restricted to. So here we go. As I slowly drift off, there we go. It's coming straight to me, which means right here is the loop it's restricted with. So I'm going to bring both of my fingers straight down to the table, and I'm going to drift off just a little bit so that they can move. And here we go. My right hand's going up to her head while my left hand's going down to her pubic bone, and then they just reverse. My right hand's going down the pubic bone and my left hand's going up to her head. That's her release. My pressure is just to the table, and then they stopped. I take my left hand away. My right hand is on the original loop that we kind of got pulled into. So now I give it a second or two to relax, and then I sink in again straight to the table. And then as I drift off, am I still getting pulled somewhere, or does it just come straight up to the ceiling? If it comes straight up to the ceiling, I'm done. It's not. It's still attracted to this one. So that release wasn't enough to get these guys to move away from each other. So we're going to bring both of these loops, now we're on two loops, down to the table until I feel tension. I back off just a little bit, and now it's showing me something different. My right hand's going counterclockwise while my left hand goes clockwise. And right there's the reverse, so my right hand is going clockwise while my left hand goes counterclockwise. And now my left hand's moving a little bit away from my right hand, and my right hand's moving a little bit away from my left hand. That's a good sign that the loops potentially just moved away from each other. So I take my left hand away. I relax my right hand, but I don't lose my spot. I give it a second or two, and then I sink in. And then as I drift off of that loop, perfect, it's going straight up to the ceiling. So what that tells me is it's not restricted, it's not attracted to this loop anymore. Okay, so I'm going to tip my hand into that motility mode and just make sure that there's movement through those loops, and there is, which is great. So that's it for the loops. So we've done the root, we did the superior aspect and the inferior aspect. We've done loop to loop here. And now we're going to do the mesentery, okay, or the loop to root. So the mesentery is the sling. So we're going to find the most restricted aspect on the inferior aspect of the root. It's going to be the same spot that we were treating before, but I'm just going to retest it just to make sure. So I'm going to leave one finger there, and then my other finger is going to go down. You can actually see her restriction here. So as I engage that root with my middle finger and my left hand, you can see the restriction through the mesentery. It's going right into her scar here. This is a very common thing for anybody that has a suprapubic scar for any reason. We feel that a lot of times this mesentery gets caught up in that. So what I'm doing with my right hand is I'm just making sure I'm on the same tissue. So like here, I'm not connected, I'm connected, I'm not connected. Right here, I feel like I'm on the same tissue. If I go out, I'm still connected, meaning I can feel this tension line. I'm still connected, I dropped off. I come back, literally right on her scar here. And I'm gonna leave one finger on that loop, okay? The left hand is on the root, and I'm working the mesentery in between, so I'm working through here. So my left hand, the one finger is going to sink in on that root, load perpendicular, scoop anterior, where my right hand, that finger is going to sink down towards the table and drift off just a little bit. And here we go. So the root is shearing towards me, and then the loop is doing a clockwise rotation. This is her release. My load with my right hand is to the table, and my left hand is perpendicular and scooping anterior. This is all her. It's just reversed, so the loop just came back counterclockwise, and the root is going to the left. And there's a gurgle, which is always a good sign that I felt. And right there, she just stopped. So I'm going to relax. I'm going to keep my fingers where they're at. And we'll go again. So my left hand sinks into the root, loads perpendicular, scoops anterior. My right finger, I'm just going to slide around here to make sure I'm at the end of that, right there, is going to sink down towards the table and drift off just a smidge. And here we go. So the loop is going counterclockwise. The root is going up into her left. And now the loop is going clockwise, and the root is going down into the right. And now the root is going up into the left as the loop goes counterclockwise. What I'm looking for, didn't quite happen there, is for my hands to move away from each other. So I want the loop to move away from the root, which means the mesentery would elongate here. That's what we're looking for. It didn't quite happen on that one, so we're going to go one more time here. So my finger on the root sinks in, loads perpendicular, scoops anterior. My right finger here, right at the end of that line, there it is. I'm going to sink down towards the table, drift off just a smidge. I'm envisioning the mesentery here, the sling. Okay, something different is happening. So the loop is shearing directly to me, kind of towards her right hip. The root is up and to the left, and now the loop is coming back to midline. That's what I want. So now the loop is kind of dropping inferior, so away from the root. As it's doing that, it's doing a little bit of a clockwise rotation. A little bit more of an inferior drop. That's good. So we're creating space between my hands. This is what we want. Beautiful. And that is it. Good. Okay. So, a couple deep breaths. Good. Now we're going to do a little bit of motility work here. Just a little bit. So again, we're looking at this fan kind of closing and then opening. Okay. And whichever way it likes to go, we encourage it in that direction. So we're just going to do a little bit of that. It's a nice little integration. So the fan is closing right now. And there it's kind of opening up and to the left and a little bit anterior. And there it's closing and down and to the right and kind of posterior. This is much better than her first visit with us. So I feel like her ileum, her small intestines are working better than they were, which is great. She likes kind of coming down and to the right, so I'm going to encourage that a little bit. And then now she's kind of going up and to the left. I'm following that, following that, following that, following that. There, she's coming down and to the right. I encourage it, I encourage it, I encourage it, I encourage, I encourage, I encourage with both hands. And there she goes up and to the left. The fan's opening again. Now I'm just monitoring what I just gained with that. There's all kinds of gurgling happening under my hands, which is good. Just going down to the right again. The fan is closing. I encourage, I encourage, I encourage, I encourage, I encourage. Reduce, and then here she comes back. Fan is opening. I monitor what I gained there. We're going to do 2 more inductions, or 2 more encouragements here. What we want is, if you think of a fan opening and closing, we want it to open and close with the same magnitude. So the same amount of motion in both directions. She's pretty close, which is great. We're going to do 1 more here. And I'm going to monitor just for 1 repetition here. She's closing the fan down and posterior. That's pretty good. There's the turnaround to opening up and to the left and anterior. Good. There's really no hesitation there. So that's pretty good. Okay, so again, it takes about 3 weeks for the visceral manipulation to play out. However, we may have some changes right now. We'll see. Again, for me, this top section here, we've kind of talked about it. I have a feeling we're going to have to do a different visceral manipulation technique for it, so I will not be surprised if it's still at a 2. So again, ring finger in the belly button, where my index finger comes, that's where I'm going to measure this. Okay. And then go ahead and lift your head up for me. Well, it's a tight 2, but it's still a 2. Okay, come on down. So that helped a little bit, but it's still 2. I'm going to come down to the belly button here. Go ahead and lift up. Beautiful. Good. So that's a little bit tighter 1, so that's great. So we'll see if that keeps going a little bit tighter for us. Again, this is perfect. Most of the time, if you ask doctors about a diastasis, 2 finger widths is normal. I really don't want to leave this for her though, so we're going to try to change that for her. So this is a 1. This is pretty normal. It feels tighter than it did at the beginning of the session. For the last one, my index finger is here. My other 2 fingers comes down right where my ring finger is. This is my measurement spot. And then go ahead and lift up. I mean, really. I would say this thing, you know what, I'll leave you at a 0.5, but I'm being super generous with this. So you can tell I can't really get a depth in here. There's a tiny little divot, but not much. Okay, so I'm going to leave her at a 0.5 with that. So we'll leave her at a 2, a tighter 1, which is good because this was a roomier 1. And then this has changed from a 1 to a 0.5, right? And so since the last session, it's still about a 0.5. So 2, 1, and 0.5. And then we'll see what happens on her 4th visit. And if it doesn't quite clear up here on the 4th visit, we're going to change and do a different visceral manipulation technique for that.